All right, so the recording has started.
Ready?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Davis. Present. Councilmember Keel. Here. Councilmember Kerr. Here. Councilmember Barnett.
Here.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Bissett. Present. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 7 members present.
Thank you. First item of business in this work session is discussion of the town financials. I'll turn it over to the Mr. Crowe, the town manager. I believe the council has received the updated version via email, so if you want to check your computers. That over to you, Mr. Town Manager.
Okay, so we're still working on financials with our accountants and trying to nail down some things. So I'll try to go through this and answer questions best I can. The page you're looking for is on line 10 on the first page. Our operating assets should be 615,794. And that is as of April 30th. Right now, we're actually sitting about 1.2 million in the bank. But these are through April 30th. So, these numbers include, as we go through them, sales tax receivables of 331,335. I don't know why that is still in there. That's April, and there's still a mistake on line 18 to 19. If you ask, we did the other tax receivables is the road and bridge tax, first quarterly payment, which we did receive. So, it's not receivable anymore, although we received it in May. That's right. These are April's. They don't include the May.
But I question the number.
Yeah, I questioned the 331, the 35 is correct.
It should be about 305, I think, instead of the 331.
Yeah. Go down, scrolling through, and if you see anything, please just scream it out. Any questions?
Well, one note, the other tax receivable, again, this is new information. I think it's new information for council that we received the first quarter's road and bridges tax from the county. So that's what that 35,000.
Okay, under accounts payable, we have due to Summit County sales tax advance $100,000. Now that's because this was explained to me by our council. We are not estimating, we include an estimate of our April tax revenue based on the budget. February and March are based on real numbers. It's estimated in our April tax that we will not bring in $200,000. So we're only going to bring in approximately, well, I don't know, that was the sales tax receivable line, which I question is being incorrect. But the assumption is we will bring in somewhere between 100 and 200,000. Just got these numbers minutes ago. So we will only pay back. They will only withhold 100,000 from our April taxes. Is the assumption. I am filing over our agreement, and I need to go over.
Let's talk afterwards. I believe they're ignoring one aspect of that.
Yeah, and
They're ignoring the $200,000 that we're going to receive on 15th. And further advance, we should take 600,000 towards advance. Then we pay 200,000 of that back at the end of the month. So the net to it is 100,000.
Like I said, I did not dive into the details of the payment, but when the accountant put this together, the assumption was we would never actually cut a check to some accounting for the past.
And she's ignoring that there's another 200,000 we received.
But in April, we won't receive 200,000.
Yes, we did.
No, for our April taxes.
No, they give us another 200,000 advance in April.
Yes,
Then we pay that back at the end of the month. So the net is zero in April. It stays the same.
yeah, but her assumption is that we won't have $200,000 in sales taxes in April.
But we'll still owe 400,000.
We still owe the money, but the assumption the accountant is operating under.
Let's talk that, because it's a bad thing.
I agree. I agree with that. She could not explain why, the net negative 200,000 is invested in capital assets as opposed to a different fund line. Beth is going to talk to Ken and get back to an answer on if that is the proper location for that. So,
Yeah, and can I just make one other comment, just again for the audience that's attending today? We're a startup, the accountant is new, we're new as well. The accountant interpreted our budget the best they could as they started out, and we're in the process of adjusting and fine tuning that as they go. So the fact that the numbers for the second set of financials that we receive aren't as we would like to see them presented, probably isn't terribly unexpected. And they will be corrected as we go forward. So this isn't a major issue that we're out of control from a budget and cost standpoint. It's just a matter of how the various dollars have been accounted and where they're located on the sheets.
that's correct. Our bottom lines are all correct. And the bottom line there, total fund equity at the end of April was 824,175, including receivables. Line by line budget. If you have any questions, please ask. As I said, this is, so far we've only received sales tax for partial month in February and March. The 980, the difference in that in our receivables for February and March was $60,628 above what we projected. That's the variance there in those 2 months. And then April, we're just using the estimate. So the actual and budget in April will change as we get the actual numbers in later. See, the road and bridge tax, the cigarette tax are in the income there. No licenses as of yet to April. Expenditures are generally where we're expected to be or below. We're significantly below on a lot of the employment expenditures, employment related expenditures, just because of the way staff started. Basically, we were budgeted for full staff up from February 8th, and obviously that didn't happen. So it could have happened. All other expenses are generally in line with what we were expecting to pay. As I said, maybe a little below our budgeted numbers at this time. Some things are a little bit above budgeted numbers. For example, our IT and our office building. Well, we don't have any expenditures in office building maintenance. So some of our expenditures are a little bit more because the budget was based on estimates rather than previous uses and previous expenditures.
And some of it's based on timing.
Yeah. It'll all work out. It looks, in general, we're operating the way we should be operating, it looks like. As I said, some of our things are a little bit off, but it's timing, it's IT and technology. We spend more in the beginning of the year. The 4-month budget is just that. It's a 4-month budget. It really doesn't necessarily, it's not operating on history. It's really just operating on kind of expectations of the cost in the beginning. So if we're over on the line compared to our 4-month budget, it might be something we pay up front. It might be something that the breakout of the budget didn't quite anticipate, or it might be something that's just slightly more expensive, although for the most part, it seems like we're nailing our estimates pretty well. Good job.
One other comment is when you get to the capital improvement side, you see, we've expended about 16,000 through April, versus a budgeted amount of 80. Part of that difference also is that there were some anticipated expenses in there that we're simply not going to have. So we, at the end of the year, I would still expect to see a significant underrun on the capital improvement side. For instance, furniture was included in our lease here, so we didn't have to purchase any furniture for the staff. For office setup and supplies, I think most of the supplies have been purchased out of the current operating side versus initial startup cost of buying all the supplies to start with. So again, it's timing and where the expenses were charged.
I mean, in my opinion, so it's better to come in under your expenditures at the end of the year on the budget and over on your revenue. But any questions, we're still so early, there's a lot of funds that we haven't had any revenue into or expenditures out of. A lot of budget lines that we haven't addressed yet, but we'll be addressing in the very near future. For example, repayment for incorporation costs. But any questions?
Question on like things like the office lease, we had zeros in the budget. And obviously the actual, for the annualized, are we close to the budget?
We're right on it.
Yeah, we're right on.
Okay. That's what I'm gonna talk about.
Dan, in answer to your question, the first payment on the lease was due on the 1st of May. That's why it probably doesn't appear here. This is 2/30.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's why I don't see a budget.
And we'll obviously have a lot of startup costs with legal, which is a little higher than what we had thought, but I assume that's a lot of the good startup stuff. So on an annualized basis, you feel like that's.
Well, no, we're gonna be quite a bit over on legal this year. We're putting together a town. There's not a lot of background on what the legal costs of
Okay, it's
that.
underestimated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would expect those costs are somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 under estimate.
Okay.
It will, I anticipate in coming years, these expenses, legal expenses will come down a bit, but that's
So
so
no
much.
reflection on the legals. In the three legals.
We're going to be back. Any other questions on the financials? I am sitting down with Marquetti and with Ken and Beth here this week. Going over, so I have a better concept of where they're coming from on how they're making their decisions. So next month I should be much more prepared to explain this and answer these questions.
One thing I do want to point out is that from a cash standpoint, from the balance sheet, you see a cash balance at end of April of 615,000. And then at the end of May, or the deposits in the month of April deposits in May were $505,000 for sales tax, which is about 16,000 over budget. Good news. But that put our cash balance out there sitting at over $1 million, or 1.2, I guess. And so there's going to be an item on the agenda tonight for COLA Trust to be able to move some of that cash over into interest-bearing accounts, and there'll be discussion on that as well. And then, so we're doing exceptionally well from a cash standpoint. Even when you look at it from a cash flow standpoint, and there's a separate analysis done on that, we are significantly ahead on the cash flow as well. All right, any other questions? All right, the next item on the agenda is a discussion of the reimbursement of incorporation expenses. On this item, I'm going to recuse myself. And the reason is, I was the head of the incorporation committee. I was integral in making all of these decisions on the expenses that were incurred in the incorporation process. And as a result, I believe that, and as the person who worked with all of the lenders who loaned the incorporation committee money, I handled those negotiations directly. So consequently, I have a very vested interest in the result of that item. And consequently, I'm going to recuse myself. And at this point, I'll turn the meeting over to the pro tem, and I will leave the room, and I would ask you to please come and get me when we're done. Or let me know, and I'll just go have a drink.
We want to do something with that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, as get exits, I'd like to turn it over to, we're going to point of order.
I need to disclose that I served on the incorporation committee. I do not have a conflict with vendors since I did not handle any of the money, and none of the reimbursements come today, but I think I wanted to be transparent.
Okay. So with that, Ms. Graham, would you like to do this item?
Yes, so under Colorado revised statute, all costs and expenses connected with incorporation proceedings, including all election expenses and fees necessary for legal expenses, shall be paid by the governing body of the newly incorporated city or town within 1 year of the date of incorporation. Now, there are some costs and expenses that are not necessarily reimbursable. We'll be discussing the reimbursable cost in just a little bit. Billy Hoffman is going to go over everything for us. But basically what it comes down to is during the course of the incorporation committee incurred cost of approximately, $166,913.16 that they believe are reimbursable costs and expenses. Actual expenses were a little higher. However, the incorporation committee received donations that offset some of the expenses. The expenses should be in your packet. They are in your packet. And here's what we as staff are looking from right now. After Ms. Hoffman makes her presentation, if the town council approves and believes these expenses are all correct and reimbursable, instruct staff to prepare a resolution that will release the funds to pay these reimbursable expenses. If you as a council question any of the validity of any of these expenses, instruct staff to work with the incorporation committee to determine if the disputed items are eligible, and then prepare a resolution approving the updated expenditure amounts. At this point, no motion, no action is required, just instruction to staff. And I am going to introduce Hillary Hoffman to go over the cost and expenses. Family corporation.
I think most of you know me already. Those that don't, I'm Hillary Hoffman. I served and continue to serve until we finally wrap it all up as treasurer of the Keystone Incorporation Committee. And as such, I was responsible for the actual payments made to our various vendors, lawyers, or anybody else that was involved in the cost of the incorporation. You all should have received a packet that probably had, other than the 2 pages of introductory memo, you received about 7 pages. So first off, I'm going to just direct you towards the end. The last 2 pages are invoices that we are passing on, that we did not pay, that we are passing on to the town directly to pay. And those 2 invoices are one for our interim town manager in the amount of $18,900. And then the other one was directly to the Farnsworth Group that was responsible for doing our prescriptive survey, which is a reimbursable expense. So we did not pay those 2. We held them back till the end. And at the time, we've decided that it made sense to pass that on directly to the town rather than pay it and then ask the town to reimburse it, because timing wise, it would just be more efficient to do it that way. So that's what those last 2 invoices refer to. Now I'll direct you to the second page, because that's a good recap of everything that was spent, where it went, and our account. So if you'll notice that we had a total cost of incorporation costs of $220,962. Of that, the $48,750 for the Farnsworth survey and the $18,900 for the interim town manager are included in that $220,000. We have calculated $135,785 of what we deem as reimbursable. And then we have a total of $17,528 of non-reimbursable expenses, which if you look in that top part, we've already spent $11,810. We have loan interest on the loans that were received by the committee of $4,100 roughly. And other miscellaneous remaining costs to close things and wrap things up of about $1,600. I did receive another invoice this morning to the tune of just under $400 that might throw this off just a little bit, but it'll be something that the incorporation committee will pick up on our own side and not apply to the town for reimbursement. So based on that $135,785, we've determined that we only want to request a total of $99,263 in our materials here from the town, and then the difference we would pick up through the donations that we received from various members of the community early on when we started this whole process. So based on that, I know that you all had a budget of $180,000. The total cost of the town would be the $99,263 that we are requesting, the $48,750 of the descriptive survey, and the $18,900 for the interim town manager, for a total of $166,913 and change. Therefore, we'll be coming in at about just under 93% of the budget for the total cost to the town. If you'll look on the previous page, you'll see the actual breakdown by category. And then there's 3 pages of detailed transactions that back that up. And those are grouped together by classification. I'll leave that to questions if anybody has anything. Does anybody have anything else they want me to add into this discussion, or? Any questions, comments?
Yeah, any questions from the council?
Sure.
I think it's so admirable that some people donated.
Yes.
With no expectation. What was that number?
The total donations were $61,000.
Thank you.
And that included some that came from the, KCL, the Keystone, Citizens League, which has now been renamed the Keystone Community. But, they seeded the initial funds to get us started, and then we received a total of about $61,000 in, $54,000 from the community. And then we had some loans that we also used to, help fund some of the, expenses.
Any other comments or questions from the council? You said that there was an invoice that came in. Were you anticipating, I mean,
I tried to throw in cushions for what I expected, but most of those are non-reimbursable expenses anyway. The invoice that came in today was for, another interest invoice on the Farnsworth, but since we'd already turned in our, invoice, a cumulative invoice as of, the end of March, I believe it was, we've decided that any additional interest statements that come through from now to the end, we would just pick up ourselves as non-reimbursable.
we'll fully pay on all the elections?
Everything's fully paid except for, actually very little. The interest that we'll have on the loans that we're gonna repay, the little bit of Farnsworth interest, our D&O insurance, if we have to carry it one quarter further, but we expect to be closed up by then, and then our monthly website costs. And we have prepaid for the next year's tax return for 2024 to, wrap that all up with the account.
Any other questions or comments? Then, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I would just say these are expenses that we've been anticipating.
Mhm.
Council was well aware that we were going to pay the salary for the interim manager and the descriptive survey. We have to be grateful that Farnsworth was willing to wait. Yes, they didn't charge us. They helped.
Yeah, it's been close to 2 years, so it's been very good. They're very generous. I mean, we are collecting interest on it, very generous that they allowed us to incorporate first.
Elections, we have learned, are not inexpensive,
I know.
even though each one was cheap. Thank you.
And that's due to the great work done by the election committee to seek out better options as they learned more and not have to, they saved quite a bit on subsequent elections when it came to ballot.
And fully voluntary.
And our volunteers were incredible.
Did you have questions? Any other questions or comments? I'm suggesting, since I know nobody rebelling, that we get your suggestion bringing forward, including the two instances that are going to help them figure. Was that an agreement?
The farmers are,
Yes.
okay.
The two bills.
Yes.
Yeah, not the two that we said we would pick up.
No, correct. Yes. So there's 3 elements. Any other comments? Then we can allow that other guy in.
All right.
Thank you, Hillary. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll come to being on the election commission. A lot of good volunteers. They did get smarter. Prices went down. We negotiated a lot. It worked out pretty well. You can see that in the prices. So we're getting better at it. Thank you, everybody that was on it. Do we have to go see it again? Where do you go?
You're trying.
I can hear me.
Thank you.
Oh,
So vacating absence.
I know. I'm gonna have to listen to the recording of this later and find out how efficient the meeting can be run. I appreciate it. And I also accomplished some other business in dealing with the constituent who had questions on short-term rentals, so that was a good use of time. All right, next item on the agenda is the discussion of the Class 2 development review and other application classes. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hirsch.
For the record, Lindsay Hirsch. At the last meeting, which was May 14th, there were several inquiries regarding certainly class 2 types of applications. And I did take the opportunity to kind of go a little further and really try to spoon feed you information that could overwhelm you. And with that being said, while certainly the questions did arise from class 2 reviews, which are currently administrative, I did take the opportunity to show you what other types of applications were. It's sort of just process oriented towards who reviews what. But I'm going to focus in on class 2 reviews, and what I did on page 2 of your staff report is I listed all the class 2s that are currently allowed. And they go from accessory dwelling units to temporary use permits for construction offices, to renewals, to even marijuana use, home occupations. And basically, because of my relative long tenure with the county, I saw a lot of these change over the years. And for instance, the first one, accessory apartments, which used to be more of a class 4 review, which is a public hearing in front of a planning commission. But some of the others, for example, site plan renewals and other types of renewals and things like that are clearly more administrative in nature. Now, why did accessory apartments, for instance, not the only thing we talked about, change? Well, based on the history of housing in the county, what the Board of County Commissioners did over the years, went from a class 4 conditional use permit process, which public hearing and took upwards of 3 months, but maybe 3 months worth of staff time and to actually get to a public hearing, they in this case wanted to make it a little bit more streamlined and make it more regulatory in nature and less discretionary. But with that being said, for instance, small scale hydroelectric and engineering or energy systems, like someone wants to put up a solar panel in the backyard. They felt that staff was competent enough to review that type of application, and it wasn't worthy of a public hearing automatically. Now, with that being said, all these class 2s can be, for lack of something else, called up. But in actuality, it's an appeal. Now, I will note that over the years, most of these haven't come in, but for instance, the medical marijuana stuff and let's see what else. The small scale energy systems, so that really hasn't come in. But certain home occupations, more intense uses, certainly have been called up in the past. So with that being said, I'm looking for direction from council based on that list. I mean, basically, if we want to have some of these uses, all of those uses have more discretionary review, and automatically either go to the planning commission or council, that would necessitate a code amendment in order to do that. We are more than capable of doing that. However, depending on which categories or which types of applications you would consider wanting to hear on a discretionary basis, public hearing, then I think a little bit more analysis would be needed, because there could be more staff, well, there would be more staff time. If I or another planner is writing a staff report, or if we're gonna amend the code to have it as class 4 or higher, then there'll be some associated fees with that. And I just wanted to call attention. I'm very curious to hear what the council says with regards to this very issue. And I'm looking for the action. So do you have questions for staff?
Councilmember Sullivan.
Well, first question I had is, I'd heard that certain home occupation sometimes is an issue. I'm not really sure really what the definition of that, what would be the issue if it was a
Noise. So typically, I believe there are 3 different classes, categories of home occupation: low impact, moderate impact, and high impact. That's my recollection. The high, and they're sort of listed, and there's a little bit, I mean, it's hard to list every home occupation, but for instance, if someone is running bookkeeping out of his or her home, then that's a low impact. And, just administrative, we know to make sure that, we're doing everything right. And then like the next level up is if maybe, say, an architect wants to work from home, but has clients come to the property. Maybe that's moderate, maybe it's not, but that would be, a little bit more impactful on neighbors maybe. And then the third one would be, for instance, one that comes to mind is someone that wanted to work on firearms. There's certainly other permits from the state and the federal level, but that potentially could have higher impact, noise, fumes. So those are really the things that make it rise to a different level.
So is that level 3?
Yeah, that would be a
We start up a band. I mean, I'm just thinking like in home, I mean, what would actually happen? So it goes to staff.
So for a band?
Yeah.
So is the band having people come to the house to hear them play?
Practice.
Well, number one, it was that. That's a good one, Dan. We must think that. Well, number one, the noise ordinance would still be applicable. So if it reached a certain decibel level over the threshold for, in this case, a residential neighborhood from certain areas, mainly property line, then the sheriff would respond and potentially write a ticket. But if the band were performing there and charging, that's a commercial operation, that just simply would not be allowed.
Okay.
No questions? Councilmember Thistle.
How do we collide with HOA policies? Because we have a community that's primarily comprised of HOA associations. And I know each HOA has different policies. So if you had somebody who applied for a home occupation, a license, permit,
It's a permit.
and that was in conflict with the HOA policies, how does that get discovered or done?
Depending on the magnitude of the home occupation, there are public noticing requirements. But that's a great question. The simple answer would be independently. I don't have any review authority, or the town doesn't have any review authority over your HOA bylaws and CCNRs.
Would public notice be sent to the entire HOA? Because I know a couple weeks ago, we were talking about a project it seemed like the radius of notification was, no offense, but pitiful. So I would want to make sure that if something came up that could potentially impact a neighborhood, that the radius was wide enough that the public notice would reach.
Excellent question. And we certainly understand what you're saying. Typical notice, for most applications, I'd say 90 some odd percent is 300 feet from property lines. That's it's the way the code's written. And the whole part, okay. It is our code, it is the way it currently is, but, if, council doesn't believe that's enough, then, the idea behind it, the 300 feet is to capture immediate impacts on neighbors. That certainly is from, property lines. So, on bigger lots, you're absolutely right. However, the way the code's written, it is 300 feet, and I believe there is a clause in there to allow it greater if deemed appropriate.
Is there a way we can address that legally by requiring notice, or if it falls within an HOA, that notice be sent to the HOA? Or,
Yeah. We can do that.
I mean, I'd be more comfortable with that, given how governed most of our community is by HOAs, not all of it, but a good portion of it has to coexist with HOA policies, and that can be very challenging.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Where that may fall short is some of these HOAs are not active. I mean, they're technically exist, but they don't hold meetings, very few.
Let me ask a question. If, and again, hypothetical, the case of the band, conditional use permit, I mean, the home occupation is authorized by the town. Assuming that it has been authorized, the HOA discovers that they now have a band practicing in their midst, and that violates their covenants and CCNRs. Is there anything that would prevent the HOA from then taking action against the homeowners for violating the covenant?
I think that if it comes up, I would much rather give HOA the opportunity to weigh in on the front end than having to take legal action and be able to say, we need to have this reviewed and come to a public meeting and say, this is why we're contesting this, then have them have to backdoor it on the end. That's just, it's frustrating as an HOA president and as an association to have to fight that battle after the fact.
Really understanding of the good news moment with regards to the band example would be, that would most certainly be a class 4 type of review, which necessitates a public hearing. So everyone within 300 feet, it would be noticed, more than, and more often than not, and then I'm just speaking off of some degree of experience, that 300 feet oftentimes catches common area, which automatically would go to the HOA. Because that's where the tax bill goes for the common area. So I mean, I'm just trying to give so many examples, but and the property is posted, there's a legal notice on the property for class 4s. It's in the paper, and again, the 300-foot noticing. So
what you're really talking about is the impact of not noticing broader range is to the single family HOAs that may not have have large common areas. And so we're talking about 1, 2, 5 HOAs in Keystone that would be potentially impacted.
How hard is it to put a caveat in there that we just then really enjoy?
We could.
And that's
If the council wants to do that,
just ask.
We can do that. I mean, with, Jennifer, I think I'm going to, that would necessitate a, amendment to the code.
Yes.
Councilmember Kirk.
Let me make sure I'm understanding this notification that we're talking about, sending to the HOAs as well as within that 300 feet. Every class 2 action calls for a notification. When is a notification called for?
Now, only, we were talking in the realm of HOA or home occupations and that specific 1/10 use. Now, the class 2s that are listed there do not necessitate a public notice. So on page 2, all of those things that I listed, you know, it's not publicly noticed, it's not put in the paper, it's not posted. It is the watch card, if you will, would be me doing a notice of action to council, and that's how you find out. And if you think it's a problem, if you have heard a complaint, if you have an issue, then you have the ability to call that up.
So the 2 concerns related to that. First, about the HOA notifications. A very positive point is that the notifications that are on a fence or in the newspaper pretty much assumes that these are going to be looked at by full-time homeowner, full-time residents, or those second homeowners who just are lucky to be here at this moment. So I don't think that's our best foot forward to give notification. But I don't understand what triggers notifications. Is it your call?
My decision.
Okay,
So I render a decision, staff goes, I don't think it's gonna be, it meets the criteria in the code, whatever the application is. And I make the call. So,
all right, let me continue down that lane. So Dan has proposed the band.
yes,
Perhaps the one we should be talking about is the one that drew some attention 2 weeks ago, and that is about an ADU. Now, on this class 2 list, it specifies only ADUs on duplex lots. So question 1 is, what about ADUs that are on single residential lots? And the second thing is, how would you assess that?
and, well, they recently, the county recently changed the code to make it even more lenient for single family dwelling in a similar accessory apartment. That dropped from a class 2 to a class 1. So you just go in your building permit. Again, there was a huge push by the county right around to provide more attainable, affordable housing, of which accessory apartments, caretaker units, on-site employee housing are all classified under that one section. So in an effort to get more potential affordable housing, workforce housing, they believe that they should make it easier. Now, that doesn't, there's still some financial costs associated with these things, but the philosophy, the reason being is they wanted to make revisions associated with affordable housing easier and allow more.
Allow more by having less attention to it.
To take roadblocks out, that's the way it is.
So it seems like we're talking about 2 things. The original proposal was that we look at this list and decide if there were any that we felt like needed to be elevated to a different class.
Yeah.
Given the fact that we adopted the last version of the county's
That is good.
P and Z.
Yeah.
And then secondly, my proposal that, I don't know how, we can't make any decisions, but I would like to reassert that we need to maybe put a line in there about considering notice to HOAs. So is this the time you want us to put forth the ones we don't think belong on this list and need a higher level of scrutiny? Yes, no?
I mean,
I would propose ADUs. And I would propose the medical, or the marijuana shops, just because that's an outlet thing. Those are the ones that pops in my mind.
all of them, all marijuana, there are 3 different types.
Yes.
Okay.
If I correct, you would also include in the category the single family home ADUs as well, for class 1.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
And I don't know where this, and first, thank you for this. It's very helpful information, and I really, send it to me separately too, because I couldn't pull it up and say that. Because anyway, but I would also like to make sure that there's and I don't know where this falls. But when traffic is impacted, I would like to see us review that a little more closely than it has been, since it's been a long time since an accurate traffic study has been done in this town. And I'm not sure where to tell you to put it, but I think this is a concern, and it's gonna be an ongoing concern. And I will trust your judgment on how to handle
Traffic and parking.
it. Well, yes, and parking tends to impact traffic, so, yeah.
Staff issue unclear. I think for the time being, if, I'd like to stay the course with that one issue.
Which,
I'm sorry, I'd like to stay the course with the notice of action with regards to, if council has concerns about potential impacts, then all you have to do is email the phone and we can initiate that process to bring it up. The problem with the traffic, certainly the traffic portion of the baby parking, is there are no real thresholds, clear thresholds in the code that says, you know, at 34 parking spaces, that's major nature, it needs to be called up. It doesn't work like that. Traffic is also quite interesting, and I, over the years, relied on engineers to go to direct me with regards to what is significant and what isn't. And what I've learned as over the years is those thresholds are much higher than you think that they should be, is my guess. And those standards aren't specific to our community. They're at least in part based on national averages and big cities, and not necessarily all of that applicable. So while it could be viewed that a 10-unit multifamily project, it has significant parking and or traffic impacts. When engineers go to their code, it may not reach that threshold. Now, with that being said, there are some other devices to be utilized, like level of service at intersections and things like that. But it gets quite technical in nature. So again, I'm speaking really to educate you and empathize with how certain types of development may be viewed as major by one person, may not be by another.
Councilmember Davis, you raised your hand again?
yes. And I think you partially answered that, but how do we solve that problem? Because we are a small town and we do have limited roads and we do have limited access. And so is that something we could address when we do the master plan?
You took my thunder.
Sorry about that.
So I think the first look at those issues, which are absolutely justified, can be brought forth during the master planning process. Now, whether or not, that would give me a
I'm just concerned about projects that slip under the wire in the interim. Because I think where this is coming from is that we already have a significant issue, and so any little piece of straw that gets added to the pile feels a lot heavier because they haven't been addressed prior.
So you're talking cumulative impacts.
Yes, and now we're at this point where like, enough. We can't continue to add to this problem that exists.
I believe that over the course of the master plan, let me say it differently. I don't believe there's anything on the immediate horizon that will drive it up and over the threshold, wherever, whatever that is. I'm just not aware of it. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I don't think so. I believe the master plan efforts will lay the foundation for these concerns and how to address these concerns. Now, they'll be very interesting. There'll be stakeholder groups, there'll be working groups, there'll be a lot of citizen participation to identify these issues. And we'll see how this master plan gets formulated. But everything that you're bringing to attention will be addressed in your master plans.
Okay, so for now, what do you decide? Thank you, thank you. You are- What are you getting out of this conversation going forward?
Well, let me summarize what I think the guidance is, that it may save some time.
Okay,
I think the guidance is, we'd like to see an ordinance amendment that automatically brings forward, at least notification to the council of all ADUs, of all of the medical marijuana centers, products and manufacturing facilities, medical marijuana optional permits cultivation facilities, residential cultivation of marijuana, and that any property that we're noticing is required, that included in the notice would be notification to the HOA board.
That's what I have.
I like it.
What about the bans?
No rains.
So, is that
Yeah.
the guidance you need?
Just a point of clarification, notification to council, do you want something else instead of the notice of action?
I think the council then, once we get the notice of action, can make a decision whether we'd like to call that an email.
And that's the 7-day period, correct?
There's a 7-day call period, yes.
which is not always jive with our meeting schedule.
Yes.
But it's a matter of when he provides the notice.
So I'm required for the code, all class twos need notice back. So, I don't, well, I'm not exactly clear on what in addition you would want on that.
Councilmember.
Is there a way to, group them? I don't know what the time frame is that you have to send out notices. Is there a way to group them so that we can align the discussions with our meetings and approve them within 7 days? Like if you did it on the second Tuesday or whatever, so that we could,
No,
or they have to be,
it comes in as they come in.
okay.
So they come in, they follow the process, if you will, and depending on the type of application, it takes usually about 3 weeks to do it,
Okay,
but sometimes more. So it would be tough to do that, but when it is set in stone that, 7 days after I render my decision, or from the moment I do my decision, I send you a notice of action. You have 7 days to make the inquiries and find out if you want to follow up.
Councilmember Davis.
Does the call-up have to occur within a town council meeting?
No,
Okay,
or,
but the discussion would,
not put in the codes, right?
It's right, that's not, so, right, that's exactly right, that's not the way the code is written. But also think about how you want to act as a town council, do you want to, I mean, last time it was a vote that you took, that's how you make decisions, is by voting. and majority votes. And
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around how it would physically work, like,
But let me ask you a question. Could we, since it's a code issue for time, could we change the code to, while we're making the other changes? To, instead of having the 7-day code requirement, to have the code requirement, to be noticed to council at the next council meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would then recommend also to change the code so that it says that the call-up decision must be made by majority of the council members present at that meeting.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
That worked.
That works? Anything else? All right. Moving on. Next item on the agenda is discussion of short-term rental licensing of the short-term rental licensing ordinance. And with that, well, before that, again, for the audience, the folks, in the state, the folks who currently have licenses, I know there are a number of you that are probably listening today and in the audience today. What we started with last week was the Summit County, current Summit County code, as it relates to short-term rentals and requirements. And I think it was the overall intent of the council, to adopt that code, perhaps with some minor tweaks, and rewording to reflect the town handling of the licensing versus Summit County handling the licensing, as the town would take over responsibility on 30 September. So that's really what we're addressing today. And then after 30 September, in the next year, before the next licensing, then to have a very robust community process with all the stakeholders involved, looking at those codes and the ordinance to determine if there are any changes that needed to be made to support the community as a whole. And it's just a matter of timing and the amount of work that needs to be done between now and the 30th of September to renew 2,000 short-term rental licenses versus coming up with a perfect solution now. And that solution really needs to be a broad community process. So that sort of sets the stage for this discussion that we're having now. And if any council members have a disagreement with that, if that's kind of our approach, please feel free to speak. But with that, I'll turn it over to the town manager.
And I will immediately turn it over to our town clerk, Betty, and to our town attorney, Jennifer.
All right, so as Ken stated, we started with the existing Summit County short-term rental ordinance and made a few tweaks to kind of make it fit some of the administrative processes that would happen if it was taken over by the town of Keystone. The staff report highlights a couple of those things. So in this case, the town clerk would issue the licenses instead of the community development department. In the case of a denial, town council would be designated as the review body for the applications rather than the community development director, just because there's a different structure in the town versus the county. And then it added language just clarifying specifically that the responsible agent or their designee should be able to respond to complaints in person within 1 hour. So this is meant to be a wide conversation to kind of start things off and say, here are what we took from the feedback last week, and then what changes might need to be made in your draft.
Comments? Recur.
So, in the discussion last week, I took exception to several paragraphs in the county, policy that referred to the deleterious nature of STRs. I think you've rewritten it very nicely. I'm not sure who, probably both, working together to recognize the fact that STRs are important in this community, but we need a balance between, the STR community and the the residential community that people that work well together. So I thought it was pretty good. Well, I wondered what my fellow council members thought of that.
Councilmember Davis.
There are several sections in the code, as written, that, read like, you get to say if it's okay. Whereas in the HOA, it might not be okay. Specifically fire pits, which frankly, if we're in a wildfire zone, I'm not sure we would want to permit anyway, but I can think of some areas where it would be okay. Parking. Each HOA has X number of parking spaces, and in actuality, the way the county has handled this is you, the HOA, set the code, or you set the, I think the term was parking plan, which have worked out well. Noise, again, each HOA, or at least mine does, has quiet hours. I don't expect our town clerk to have to keep up with all of this. Pets, and signage. And, I would like some wording, and don't ask me to do it, I didn't attend law school, that says that you also have to follow the HOA guidelines, for the, STRs. And I don't know what the right wording is, but I'm gonna count on Jennifer for that. But those are the areas that specifically caught my eye, because most HOAs do have rules related to those. And, I don't think we as a town want to get crosswise with those things.
Let me just ask follow-up question. Would it satisfy that there's a section in here where the owner has to certify that they're meeting all of the STR requirements? Could we also add in there that they meet all the STR requirements and the HOA requirements for STRs in that community?
So I have some concerns with tying the license and compliance with the STR license requirements to HOA rules. One, I haven't reviewed all of the HOA rules. I don't know what they are. I don't know if there are any legal issues associated with the HOA rules. Probably they're all fine. But you have a lot of HOAs, and I think it's a big lift already for the staff that you have in place to manage the regulations and the number of STRs that you have. But for somebody to be complaining that an STR is violating HOA regulations, it just seems like an administrative nightmare to me. I think you can put some language in here that says that they should be required to follow it, but it's not a condition of the license. I mean.
So what you're saying then, that if an HOA has more restrictive requirements on rentals than the town, the HOA can enforce that through the covenant process.
Sure. Yes.
But the town will not be enforcing through the covenant.
Right.
All right, Councilmember Keel. Move around.
So I guess in this conversation, my question is about the conditional use permit. 'Cause it says in here that a property owner can request an increase of allowed parking spaces through a conditional use permit. I think that's where my concern would be, like, how would that work? I mean, that an HOA only has a set amount of parking spots. How are we allowing conditional use permits?
And I'll go back to the attorney's response a second ago. If the town could potentially grant, an HOA could grant a conditional use permit for 50 parking spots, to be nonsensical. However, the HOA requirement says you could have one.
Right.
The HOA would then take action against the owner, and
But if the town has already approved the permit,
Doesn't matter.
it seems
the
crazy.
HOA trumps it with this covenant.
I think I can clarify this.
Yeah.
Just because the HOA says something is allowed, does not mean you can do it if the town has said it's not. Just because the town has said something is allowed, doesn't mean you get to do it inside your HOA. Your HOA is already restricted.
Right.
Whatever is more restrictive holds the rule. They can't overrule each other.
Right.
Or violence.
But what kind of burden is that putting on Maddie to have to approve permits that then have to get fought? I mean, that's pretty.
It really sort of that, because if an STR, if the town approves that 50 parking spot STR, and the HOA has a requirement for 2, the STR enforcements or covenants on the owner, and the owner can face fine and legal action for violating their covenants. And the HOA rules.
Right.
But it's up to the HOA to enforce that. The town does not enforce HOA covenants.
And I think I could add further clarity, like before the town existed, before these rules were in place, you couldn't do whatever you wanted just because there wasn't a county rule that prohibited it. If your HOA prohibited it, it was still at that point on the HOA to enforce their covenant. Just because the county or now the town says you can do it, doesn't mean that you get to overrule your HOA. But it is upon them to enforce it.
So the question was related to the conditional use permit.
Yeah.
That's also, that's tied to the land development code, so our town code. That's something that Lindsay was just talking about under the class 2 review. So somebody would need to have a conditional use permit under that class 2 review for additional parking.
Which now would provide notice if we make the change later on to the HOA that it exists with.
Yes.
But we did notification of that.
But I still support Gretchen's. If there's some way that we can legally come down around making Maddie have to be responsible for it, I would still really support having some statement that there needs to be deference to HOA policies and that this is not in fact a carte blanche license to violate.
I think another way to do it is also in the good neighbor guidelines. Is to put something in the good neighbor guidelines, because that's what's gonna be posted in the units. And to specify there that you have to follow the HOA rules. Maybe we can also put in that they have to post the HOA rules in the unit.
Maybe if I may, just even on the application or license, a statement saying, so the town of Keystone is granted this license, your individual HOA may still have rules that affect your use of the spot.
Essentially just a reminder.
Just a reminder.
I love that idea, and I love the idea that, and you should post them as part of it. Because that saves every HOA in the community from having to pass a rule saying you have to post the rule.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, how many rules do you post? My HOA is 20 policies,
Or have them available in a binder.
but again, and keeping those updated
Yeah.
is. Councilmember Davis.
I just want some language in there similar to what John had.
Is
Because I don't want people going around the HOA policies and putting them in a difficult position.
Would the language that the town manager recommended be acceptable?
Yes.
All right. Next.
Pulling this together. So-
Yes, absolutely. Councilmember Kerr.
So, Cecilia, did you say that the registered agent must respond in person? Did I understand that?
That was something that we added based on the conversation last week. It was a little bit vague in the current county code.
whether that response needs to be in person or via phone. But we added that language and we can take it out based off of direction, but responsible agent or their designee.
So I'd like to start a discussion about that. So I would think our short-term request would be for acknowledgement that they have, that they got the problem. I'm sure we'll have more discussion about that. But the second thing is, I'm wondering if that kind of requirement, the 1 hour, disadvantages smaller SDR operations. If I have an SDR that's being managed by a property management office, that property management office probably has a registered agent available to respond 24/7. If I am operating something out of my home, like a room, that's not going to be true. So are we disadvantaging the smaller operations unnecessarily?
Councilmember Arnett?
I take your point well. It's not that you're wrong, it's what's the ultimate responsibility and burden. When I rented out my house a couple of years ago, I was out of town. I didn't use property management company. But if whatever I was doing as a commercial operation out of my house, whether it was being a bookkeeper at my house, whether it was being an architect at my house and having people come over, I would be responsible if any of those commercial operations were negatively impacting the areas around me. And that I'm a single proprietor running my own business doesn't mean that I'm not responsible at all times. So I got one of my friends who was a property manager and said, hey, can you cover any issues while I'm in New Zealand? Yes, and I paid him for that. And that is the responsibility that anyone who operates any business has. And there are additional risks and workloads associated with being a single proprietor. And that does make it harder, but you can keep all the things for yourself. So how do people manage that? You can hire someone else out just for that specific service. There's probably something out there that doesn't. And if my neighbor rents out their single family home, and there's a massive rager of a party that is, and they're throwing trash into my property and making a bunch of noise, but the fact that they're not part of a large property management company aggregate their responsibility in operating that commercial operation in the house, I would argue not.
Thank you, Councilmember Kerr.
I just want to clarify, I'm not disagreeing with the word you said. It is the 1 hour responsiveness for a smaller operation. But forbid something should happen during church time when they're not going to respond. I'm not trying to overstate this, but
If you're in church and you operate a storefront and
you have a manager.
maybe you don't, maybe you have someone running the front desk and something's going on, they're having a meltdown, they're breaking out the windows of your place, you're probably gonna step out of church.
So you're comfortable with what?
Let me ask you a question again. I think the question that the clerk asked had to do with respond in person.
Correct.
Isn't really the intent of at least I believe it was the intent of the county code, and I think generally ours, that the intent was they didn't necessarily have to be present there to respond, but they had to, the responsible agent was responsible for correcting the problem within 1 hour. But yeah, I'm thinking, the type of complaints that are going to be critical in that area are parking complaints, and they're going to be noise complaints. And those are two complaints that the responsible agent needs to be able to respond quickly to, which means they're going to have to contact the renter of that unit to correct that problem if they're in fact violating the rules. And those have impact on our community if they're not correct. Councilmember Kerr.
Agreed, but now I see two different timelines. One, how quickly the registered agent responds or acknowledges the problem. And then how quickly the responsible agent can get the change made. And I think we need to distinguish.
Councilmember Davis.
If it's 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a party going on and the responsible agent takes 2 hours, that's a real problem for everyone around, and it is a real problem because I have it in the building where I live. So, I think, do they have to show up and stop the party? No, but they need to do something and they need to make it. And they need to make it work because they are disturbing other people.
That's also why we have police.
That's what I'm thinking.
I mean,
It's not the job of others in the building to have to call the police. It is the responsibility. We talked about the responsible agent. If the responsible agent acknowledges, okay, I got this mission within an hour, then we have to give time to get to the site, give a police call.
2 a.m. in the morning, if there's a party.
Someone's calling the police. I mean, if it's 2 a.m. in the morning, someone's throwing a party, looking
Responsible
up
agent
for
is the last one who's going to be involved in our.
Councilmember Arnett.
I think this is probably one of the functions of the hotline is there's a number to call. They know who the responsible agent is, they contact them. Because it's not my job to know who the responsible agent is. I do for my neighbors. And I generally have called them directly when there's been that 2 a.m. party. And we can talk, in fact, I would like to talk at a different discussion about our vastly out of date county and now our noise ordinance. But I think that you have the right thought process to think through, which is like, how long from notification to taking action and then resolution? Do they have to come physically on site, but they gotta be able to solve the problem? I think the mayor is absolutely correct about that. Now, if you can't come on site, it might limit the ways in which you can solve that problem. Because well, I've certainly seen it where I've let a lodging company know, and they've tried to call the people and they just didn't answer their phone because they were throwing a rage. So then their choice was to either come on site or call the police. And responsible agents have to realize that that may be what they're doing, calling the police on their own planners. But
Councilmember Sullivan.
I'm trying to understand what we're trying to solve. So we talked about in-person kind of notification and within an hour. What do we really say? What does it say now? So in-person is in-person. But we're not saying that they have to fix it now, but they have to take ownership of it for an hour.
Fix it within an hour.
That's part of it.
It says in person.
Well, what I'm saying, what I suggested was the intent of that wasn't that they had to be there in person to respond. The intent was that they had to respond and have the situation corrected within 1 hour.
That needs to be clarified then. Because
Well, that's the guy.
That's right.
I just share what the language says right now in the draft that's in the packet. So it says the responsible agent or their designee must be able to affirmatively respond to complaints in person within an hour of notification of such complaint. Failure of a responsible agent to affirmatively respond to a complaint and attempt to resolve such complaint within an hour of notification shall be considered a violation.
So that is 2 different time periods, right?
No, it's 1 hour for both.
If you eliminated the word in person,
Right.
does that resolve the concerns? They don't have to be on site, but they have to, within that first hour, affirmatively attempt to resolve the situation.
But that could be a matter of calling the renter, calling the police. Going over there.
Lots of options,
but not specifically that they have to be in person.
but they don't have to be there on site.
They have to be available to take the complaint. And
Right,
that's
yes.
issue. And I don't think that's asking a lot.
So is that language acceptable if you just get rid of the in person? All right, next. Yeah, I have a couple of minor ones. I think in paragraph A, we probably need to add a fourth one that talks about enforcement. Because that's one of the purposes of this, is to discuss enforcement of these, rules as well.
That's section one.
Section A, purpose. Adding the fourth item that just says enforcement.
The second page of the ordinance.
Second page of the ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, page 2 of the ordinance, purpose. Anyone else have anything before I go on? All right, the appeal process, the question is, it appears that the clerk is the initial decision maker in the ordinance, am I correct?
For issuing a license.
For issuing a license. If a license is denied, do we want it to go to the council or do we want it to go to the town manager?
I think that's your call. You know, these questions can get political. And maybe you don't want to have it out in a meeting. That decision.
Or can, if it goes to the town manager, would the, I assume, as with all decisions like that, that could be appealed to the council.
Could be, yes, we can do it that way. We can do it these steps. And we could also have it be, you know, sometimes when drafting things like this, you do the town manager or that person's designee.
Yeah.
So that a hearing officer could be put in place.
Something like that acceptable?
I'm not clear what you're saying. You said to skip a step, that would go right to the council.
Well, the way it's drafted right now is for any denials of an short-term rental license, that the denial decision could be appealed, and that appeal would be decided by the town council.
So it does skip.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And so your suggestion is that we may not want to do that?
Maybe not. I mean, I don't know how often this is gonna happen. I mean,
I think it makes more sense to go to the town manager first.
yes,
That's kind of what I was thinking. And then if that town manager can decide if it should
It needs to be
be, so political needs to be escalated. Is that reasonable?
or the town manager would make a decision. And then it would be appealed as a decision. Yeah.
Yes.
Under the revocation, we designate the hearing officer as the town manager.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
not,
This makes sense. So that's acceptable? What, anyone else? Another question I had is on page 6 of paragraph small b, SDRs on-site wastewater treatment systems. We have any in Keystone that are not on county sewers?
There's some stuff inside this in Marble Pass Village,
There
lots I checked.
I think there could be some old systems, but I thought all properties at the time.
Oh, okay, I stand corrected.
But with that being said, I believe there are a couple left in the town limits, I think Moon Valley.
stand. Okay, all right.
I did have a question.
That's for Sullivan.
What's the definition of a portable outdoor fire truck?
And solo fireplace.
Fire table.
Yeah.
That chimney, yeah.
I mean, it would be a portable.
So this, we're saying there, we can have none? Well, it was, G1G.
Outdoor fire. That's. Yes. Can't have it.
There's no nice.
have a problem with that.
What is, what a question, what a fire take for rentals?
It's for rentals, not.
Oh, it's only for rental.
It's only for rentals.
It's used in New York State, like, your fire permitting.
You wouldn't want to rely on a renter who wasn't familiar with fire danger in the area and potentially setting like, I had a simple fire pan, they can set it in some flammable brush or near flammable brush.
I missed it, that was the rentals.
Yes, only rentals.
Okay. Then I don't have a problem.
All right.
Do you think these fines are significant enough to make an impact on people's behavior?
Well, the ultimate is after multiple,
They get it revoked.
the clerk can bring it up for revocation.
Okay.
Honor,
Is there a requirement that they have to be fined 3 times?
no,
The reason I ask that is if you had a large operator who was taking individual fines of individual properties and, but had a track record. Heaven forbid, not that I'm aware of anything like
I'll
that.
have to clerk answer that question.
Well, the requirements for revocation are outlined in the, and I don't know that that would apply to a big company because it's all designating specific licensees in the way it's written right now.
Council members,
Is there a way to add some language somewhere in here? I'm nervous about our short period of rental season, really, and yes, people rent in the summers too, but when you're primarily looking at a short, constant season. And if someone has, like, let's say they have, 3 issues in that season, is there a way to add some verbiage that says that when they come up for renewal, it'll be looked at? Because if they're not running a year round, you see what I'm saying? If they're not renting, they may not care if they get 3, their season's done, repairs, right? So I'm wondering if there's some language we can put in here, that says, it'll become part of their file. Or, something that it'll be when they go to reapply or to renew, that it kind of stays, it'll be renewed with it, or it'll be looked together. Does that make sense?
It was only a 6 month vacation, wasn't it? And that doesn't necessarily deem them or impact them for the next season.
It's 3 months.
Yeah, okay.
So then it doesn't even, so I'm concerned with people not, whatever the season's done, and it won't affect their ability to renew. Or really, it should, I think. Is it possible to add language like that, or is that crazy?
It occurred to me when I read about them.
What's the downside of that?
I think typically, and I was looking through here, I don't see any renewal language, and typically short-term rental ordinances do have renewal language, it just wasn't in the county's code. So we could put in a whole renewal section, that does give discretion to the clerk to deny a renewal application.
Yeah.
I see under, page 15, the ordinance running into 16, under, Roman numeral 6. License could be, suspended up to 6 months.
Yeah.
Or revoked, or conditions placed. And I assume that if such dire circumstances were reached, then the appropriate response would match the situation. Which could certainly, it's not limited to a 3-month revocation. It's a variable suspension like, or a revocation, or something.
I like the renewal.
is there,
Like, I have to ask, like, why would we, if there's such a bad problem that needs to be addressed, why would you wait until renewal to say, oh, actually, we're not renewing it? shouldn't it be addressed in time to allow them to correct it? And if they won't correct it, then they should not work, right?
I think the renewal is just another tool in your toolbox for
Okay.
enforcement. So, may go the route that you're saying, but there may be a factual situation where not renewing is a better option.
So it could be revoked. Other actions have happened, like the owner continued to rent. The coming in for renewal. And at that point, the clerk makes the decision to say, no, we're not going to allow you to renew. Councilmember.
So are you suggesting something along the lines of an alcohol license renewal? There has to be cause, yes, and here are some of the things that could be for cause, yeah.
And I mean, it would be similar where if the clerk denied, there would be an option for appeal,
Right.
the denial of the renewal.
Acceptable, something like that?
That makes sense. I think it's worth commenting that like these regulations are set out to cover all the way out to the worst case scenarios that we hope to never, ever actually encounter or deal with.
So,
You don't want to have.
Yeah.
A clerk having to make a decision, for, non-renewal.
Yeah.
That's the nuclear option.
but it sends a signal to everyone that these are things that we will have to consider.
Other comments? Page 13. J2. First paragraph is in complaints. It's under complaints and remedies for non-compliance. It's in complaints concerning the short-term rental properties shall first be directed to the responsible agent. Most people aren't going to know who the responsible agent is. Shouldn't, if you have a complaint, first complaint should be referenced to, should be inserting it, when you have the responsible agent, or if the name of the responsible agent isn't available to the STR hotline.
Wouldn't we want everything to go through the MCR hotline? At least, yes,
Everything goes to the hotline.
we don't need to encourage people to make calls during calls.
In fact, when you make a direct call, you lose track of how many problems there are. I mean, the fact that, by the way, but the fact that there is a violation occurred, like, the noise complaint wasn't resolved until 2:30, the 1 a.m. noise complaint wasn't resolved till 2:30 or 3 o'clock, or the responsible agent wasn't available, within an hour. Doesn't necessarily call for an immediate fine.
Right.
There's discretion there to understand the facts of the situation. What you're after is a pattern. Am I correct in that interpretation, Council?
Yeah.
Councilmember Torment?
I think that that's an excellent point, and we as a town could encourage the ability to track them now.
Yeah.
I can personally comment that I've never called the hotline, but have called the responsible agents many, many times, and they certainly appreciated being contacted directly. Will I change what I'm doing? I'm not sure that I'm going to change, but as a town, I think you're absolutely right, Mr. Mayor. We should have awareness. And the purpose of the hotline is not to create, as you said, punitive action. It's to facilitate correcting the problem as quickly as possible so everyone's happy. And you only go down the corrective path is if it's a repeat or they don't solve it.
And
Councilmember Kirk?
following down that, last week I was kind of concerned about some of the fines. Wasn't sure that they were appropriate. I thought about it the last 2 weeks and I realized that the $250 fine is sort of an attention getter, just like you're talking about. We are checking, we are concerned. We want you to fix it. We want you to know, but as opposed to penalize. So I agree with what you just said. I think we're on the right track.
I agree with you, because it kind of matches what I've seen in several of the HOAs for their escalating fines for violating quiet hours or whatever would be very similar.
Yeah, and my concern also in that same paragraph, is there's no language in here about the hotline or chat about whatever we're going to adopt, for tracking. So, and perhaps if we just added that language up, shall be directed to the hotline or chat, whatever it is, that perhaps that resolves that concern. I like that, retracking.
But isn't the hotline for the community when we're talking about providing this complaint, it's coming from us once we receive the complaint to the responsible. So is that after the hotline? I guess I'm trying to understand.
This is the hotline, their job is to have all the licenses, contact the responsible agent so they can resolve it.
Right.
Right, you don't know who the SDR, or who the property management company is, maybe they switched yesterday, you call the hotline, saying, hey, they're out, they're on a bridge in a hot tub, and they look up and go like, okay, call that property management's after hours line and they contact the renters.
And then the next day, the town gets a report of all the complaints that were issued on the previous day, and those complaints are then logged under that particular SPR from a tracking standpoint. Uh, on paragraph 6, again, under its revocation, but the licensee, do we want to add, no, that's it. No. Forget that comment. Does anyone else have any thoughts before we go forward? Those are the ones I had. Anything else, any other guidance any of the council members like to make? Do you have enough guidance to finish?
So is the plan to bring this back then on June 11th for a work session?
Would you want another work session, or can we go to first reading?
I have a question.
Councilmember Permit?
Licensing fees, are this, am I missing that in here?
But those are set by a separate resolution.
Follow-up question. Would there be room in that resolution to set up fees, a fee structure, say, for an individual renting out a room in their house a few nights a week might be different than the fee structure for someone who has, they're trying to rent out every single night of the year if possible. Someone who's renting out a room in their primary residence versus someone who has a specific short-term rental property. And that being that separate thing, does that have to live in here? Because if it can be the other resolution, then we don't have time about that.
I think that typically the way that that's done is a different license type.
Okay.
So that's a question is, do you want to create a separate license for a room rental versus a whole house rental?
Wouldn't that, it seems to me like you could structure to have this SPR regulation would govern everything and just a different licensing fee based on usage.
But the problem is, how does the clerk know? How does town know what's being rented out? If the licenses are all the same, how does town know if it's just a room?
It's part of the application. And that data gets reported back through the online rental software, so that you see that it's, the person who says I'm on the 30-day or less primary residence rental is renting their place out 300 days a year, then you know that they're not following the license type they have.
Councilmember Davis?
2 questions. Isn't the goal of the SDR license fee to cover the expense of setting up the SDR licenses? And if so, is there a different cost if you're renting a room in your unit at 4 times or a house. And I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect it's about the same amount, same cost to the town in terms of staff time, et cetera. And my second question, my follow-up would be, maybe the right time, we've talked about the fact that we're going to have a deeper look at STR licenses over the next year. Maybe that's the time to explore that.
That's a great point. I agree with you.
Other comments? Good. Staff has everything we need to go forward. Am I correct from council that we would like to see the first reading at the next meeting, at the June 7th meeting? And then, the final consideration on the meeting on the 25th June. In the public hearing. That acceptable, council?
Yes.
One small thing, I have some exceptions to the good neighbor policy that the county had wanted to be put in every rental unit. I don't see it in here, right? This is gonna be, that's not something separate, right? Okay, good.
And
I think we can do better.
from a council standpoint could we ask the clerk when that good neighbor policy is drafted and ready to go, that it be brought to the council,
Yes.
not for a resolution, but just a council vote of approval. But that policy doesn't have to be in place as fast as. That one doesn't have to be in place as fast. Any other questions or comments? All right. Next item is short-term rental software options. Now, manager.
Ms. Stemper?
All right, so on this, we talked about the licensing applications at the last work session, and we got a lot of feedback from council about what different things we might be looking for in terms of enforcement options, and what capabilities software could provide for that. So over the past 2 weeks, staff has been talking with a lot of different software vendors to figure out what the best solution might be. So we talked to Deckard Technologies, which is a newer company out of the 4 companies that we spoke to. And they are kind of founded on an idea of big data and AI and machine learning ideas. And they use data science to assist local governments and with their ability to create compliance and enforcement activity. So they have a really good compliance software technology that does the SDR identification through data scraping. And then the other thing that they do is a hotline. The specific thing that I would highlight about their hotline is they have 3 different levels of hotlines available for 24/7 hotlines. And the premier level of that hotline kind of focuses on that responsible agent piece that has been a big point of discussion for town council. This is the only hotline out of all of the companies that I talked to that will do that communication with the responsible agent via phone directly with communication via person, and will do that communication several times, up to 3 times, before referring the caller to a different level and escalating the situation. So that stood out as something that was innovative in its ability to use data and be able to have that capability for the identification, but also have a human touch of that communication and responsiveness from the hotline. None of the local communities are using this right now in Summit County, but there are other Colorado municipalities using Deckard, including Lakewood, Longmont, Westminster, Telluride, and Durham. And then we spoke with Granicus, and Granicus is the current provider of STR licensing and compliance software for the county through host compliance. So I spoke with them extensively about the details of their current workflow for their STR complaint hotline. And it does initially go through to a phone tree before being connected with a live agent. So there's a couple steps that it takes for people to get to that live agent. And then after the agent initiates communication with the responsible agent, that happens via text message and email. And currently under the process that they have outlined with most of their clients, and I believe this is the process that they're following with Summit County, the hotline reconnects with the complainant 1 hour later to see if the issue has been resolved rather than specifically following up with that responsible agent. They said that we could change that if we needed to and kind of have that different change to the workflow, but it would again occur through a text message or email. Then we spoke with GovOS, and GovOS is another company that provides STR licensing, and they are currently providing regulation and licensing support for the towns of Breckenridge, Frisco, Dillon, and Silverthorne. They also provide a tiered hotline system that goes to an inbound live agent, but that live agent again does not communicate with the responsible agent via the phone. And the differences in the tiers to that hotline are that you can add additional things like dedicated operators who are always going to be answering the phone for the town of Keystone, and kind of prioritizing them in the queue. The final company we talked to was Blue Vector AI, which is a company that we're going to talk about tonight for the licensing contract for the licensing administration. And they offered an option for not a traditional call center hotline, but a virtual agent that could provide an alternate method of submitting SDR complaints using an AI-based chat agent and conversation intents. And that comes at 2 different levels, either a basic agent that has 10 intents or conversation topics and is a little bit less in depth, or a premium virtual agent that has 15 intents, and those intents can be dynamic intents, including answering questions and kind of having more conversational flow. And additionally, that premium agent would be required if you wanted to have the ability for people to do their complaints over the phone. So based off of all of the feedback that staff received last week or last work session, I think we would recommend moving forward with Deckard Technologies for the SDR identification platform and the complaint hotline because of their ability to personalize the 24/7 hotline with a focus on direct communication and complaint resolution. And it's a reasonable price that stands out in comparison to the other vendors.
Comments?
One more comment, and I saw the proposal, they say price is confidential.
Yeah.
It's not.
Oh, it is.
Well,
It is not, it is not in the public agenda.
oh, this is not.
The proposals are not in the public agenda.
Okay.
Councilmember Davis, and then.
I want to congratulate you for doing a lot of research in 2 weeks, and I appreciate it. I'm glad it was you and not me. In reading this proposal, I immediately, before I got to the others, the Deckard proposal answered some of my concerns that I had 2 weeks ago. So, I would support your recommendation.
Councilmember Keel.
My only question was whether it made any sense to, stay with the same company for licensing and for the administration part of it. I know your proposal is 2 separate ones. I'm just wondering if there's going to be any difficulty there or if it causes any complications trying to administer these separate platforms.
So there is some amount of data matching that has to happen, but the benefit of Deckard over some of those other companies is that they have the capability with their data tools to do some of that data cleaning and matching for us so that they can validate our list a little bit more easily, and it would require less staff time to do it with them versus the requirements that other companies are asking for in order to get the existing licenses into their system.
Councilmember Permit. Good work. I like the recommendation. Other comments? Councilmember Kerr.
So recognizing that we're not going to talk numbers, can you give us a general estimate? Not an estimate, a comparison among the three? Is one distinctly less expensive than the others? I think they're all 1 year pricing, right?
They're all one-year pricing. The Deckard, solution is the cheapest option for that.
So benefit and cost. Okay.
Councilmember Davis.
And the numbers are in the email that you had sent us on the work session, the one that came to our email.
Now, if you took it over to our folks to recognize that we are considering the costs and the benefits.
Then, no other comments, then do I have a sense of the council that we would ask staff to proceed with the Deckard option?
Yes.
We should have, we're in this direction. And then I assume, given the dollar value of the contract submission to come to council here.
Yep.
For approval. All right,
Is that when we would make elections around the level of hotline?
I think her recommendation was premier level.
Okay, they're in hybrid.
And as I understand it, well, let me ask just to talk differentials, so we don't talk exact numbers of since Deckard quoted the classic level versus the premier, what was the delta between the cost of premier?
I believe it was 22.50 more. Right,
No, not more.
So
No, wait,
between the classic and the premier,
what's the difference between the two?
it's $2,250.
All right,
Yeah, for actual.
yeah, just be.
relatively insignificant difference.
All right, so you have your guidance. All right, next item on the agenda is discussion of background annexation processes. And it's the item that is holding us from dinner.
So this is really an overview of the annexation process. Annexation is spelled out in state statutes, the Municipal Annexation Act of 1965. And just to take a step back, annexation is growing your municipal boundaries. So that's how the town grows and gets bigger. The staff report that was in the packet is really the process of annexation by a petition. So the landowners are submitting a petition to the town and saying, we want to be part of the town. There are very detailed requirements in the Annexation Act as to how this happens. One of the primary requirements is that the land is adjacent to the municipal boundary, and that's the contiguity requirement. There must be 1/6 contiguity of the boundary of the land proposed to be annexed with the town. And that contiguity can exist, even if there's a street that separates the proposed land and the municipality. There are other types of annexations that this staff report doesn't get into. There's a flagpole annexation, and that can be done when you create smaller annexations and create that contiguity with the flagpole. So, yes.
Then I assume that, if the town were to annex the parcels that Vale excluded, then we potentially could have flagpole annexation that moved the US six boundary to, basically the entrance to the River Run Golf Course, which is the first, to the area that, where the town boundaries would end on the west.
So what,
Because the town would now have, as part of its, boundaries, everything but the US, that US six would be totally surrounded by, town annex town, where today it is not. And that boundary was stopped earlier.
I might have to look at that to.
Yeah.
But. That
You're
seems to
ready.
make sense. Yes, yes. So a couple of things for annexation. You first have to have your plan in place. And this isn't a necessary requirement. This is the first step, but that's called your 3 mile plan. And we talked a little bit about doing a master plan, a comprehensive plan. That would be part of your comprehensive plan, is looking at boundaries 3 miles outside of Keystone and land 3 miles outside of Keystone. And is there an interest in annexing any property outside that 3 mile plan? Then the other piece of it is that the party seeking to annex has to be an owner of record of the land. There is a specific requirement in state statute related to the petition, who has to sign this. And it has to be signed by at least 50% of the owners. And they have to own 50% of the land to be annexed. Again, the next requirement is contiguity, and you've already talked about contiguity. There's a very standardized form that the petition must, that must be in place. You have to have annexation maps. And then typically you have an annexation agreement, that is in place as well. One of the most important takeaways for all of you related to annexation is that it's a legislative decision. So it's a decision of town council as to whether you annex or not. You can decide you don't want to annex, even though somebody submits a petition that meets all of the requirements. Because, and the reason being is because you're servicing property and not lands. And so it's a 100% discretionary decision.
So it would not be a quasi judicial decision, but there would be a public hearing, but it would not be a quasi judicial issue with fact finding and the rest. It's purely legislative.
That's correct. And typically with annexations, you have another piece of it, which is the zoning piece, which is quasi judicial. And those applications or those processes typically run on a similar track. So you might have your decision to annex in one meeting, and then you would also have your zoning decision, because the land needs to be zoned at the same time that you annex. So you have your annexation decision, and then you have your zoning decision at the same meeting. The zoning is quasi judicial.
Questions? Councilmember Davis?
How soon do we need to have this plan in place? What do you recommend?
Well, so you can do the plan in other ways. There's not really a lot of detail in the state statute as to what the plan needs to look like. And you can do your plan as you're going along. If you get an annexation petition, we would hurry up and put a plan in place.
Am I correct that I would imagine in our particular case, the most pressing thing that may happen in annexation may be again the 5 Vale Resort parcel, that plan would be probably developed in conjunction with Vail resorts, as it was before an act, and before a petition was even submitted.
Yes, yes, we definitely do that, yes.
Any other comments? Councilmember Third.
Since we have, or about to, confused here, adopted the county master plan, could that not be amended as opposed to a whole new one for this
Well,
purpose?
the plan, it can be very, simple. It doesn't have to be like detailed.
Phase one, the master plan, just to get out of it.
Yes, or we can have a separate 3 mile plan. That meets the requirements of the annexation of towns.
And
And
then
again,
eventually be
super simple.
infused into the bigger.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you want, the bigger one would be a more thoughtful, comprehensive look at different parcels surrounding the town of Keystone and whether there's an interest in annexing those.
Councilmember Kerr.
So I appreciate the education. I'm gonna ask the same question that Lindsay has addressed before, whether there's something imminent or not. I'm curious as to the timing.
But is there
a pressing matter?
no, there's not, I mean, it's not,
They're on the agenda.
no. There are the Vail properties that are not included in the town boundaries. And those do pose some potential issues related to land development applications. And potentially related to liquor licensing. I mean, there were parcels that were together in the county that are now separate. So that's the issue. If you have one, for example, PUD that is in Keystone and in Summit County.
But there's been no discussion.
I was gonna say-
Starting any annexation.
Who is saying this is an issue? We are just anticipating it could be
It's
issues, right?
education for council right
Yes.
now on process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? What I would propose, unless someone has an objection, is that we defer the discussion of manager council issues until the meeting tonight, when we have the same item on the agenda. And with no objection, this meeting is adjourned and dinner served. And the rest of the-
I mean, this is